we are going to be talking with some amazing panelists about the Hub and about evidence. So can I invite Mary Wooldridge, CEO of the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, former member of the Victorian Parliament, to come up. Dr. Niki Vincent, Commissioner for Gender Equality in the Public Sector in Victoria, to come up. Siri Chilazi, Gender Researcher and Behavioural Design Expert, Women and Public Policy Program, Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, who's also dressed just fabulously. Professor Matt Duckham will be here. Hello. Who is the Director of Information in Society, the Enabling Impact Platform that Mac talked about at RMIT University. And of course, Leonora. Come up, Leonora. Come up and talk. Right. So many questions to ask and so many things to say. So I'm going to start off with, maybe I'll start from Mary and we'll work our way this way. As Leonora talked about in her presentation, and there was a huge stack of books, and we've got no shortage of research on gender equality out there, many of whom in the room have published research on gender equality. So we know stuff. People know stuff. We've thought about it. We've investigated. Some people have written books about it, but there's still an action gap to see progress. And, you know, WGEA has produced huge amounts of data that is highly accessible. But as we've heard from the Assistant Minister, Andrew Lee, great sounding ideas don't necessarily work as intended or aren't always backed up by evaluations and evidence. So I'd like to hear from each of you, if there's so much research out there, what is the issue? What's the gap? What's preventing us from turning that into action? Let's start with you, Mary.
Okay, thank you. And I have to say, first of all, congratulations, Leonora.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there thinking I'm going to do the equivalent of a book, you know, and how you always go to the index first to see if your name's there. I'm going to go online and do a search by WGEA and see how many times we come up. I'm sure we'll be all doing a similar equivalent. We often talk about going from knowing better to doing better, and I think that's what the Hub is actually seeking to achieve. Because there's a lot of evidence out there, there's a lot of information. And I think what we see with employers is there's a lot of activity as well, but the activity doesn't always result in the outcome that is sought. And there's a lot of goodwill and it's done with good intent. But I think what I'm hoping, you know, the Hub and the work that's happening will enable is you know, a translation of that evidence into outcomes. And that's what we're seeking to achieve, to you know, from our perspective, have gender equal experiences at work, and utilising, you know, that breadth of knowledge by being able to ensure that the activity and the time and the investment that people are making is able to be done in a way that they know can translate, that they're either going to learn about it, but importantly, it's based on evidence so that it will result in the desired actions, and that's what we're seeking to achieve. From a WGEA perspective, we've got an interesting time. We're now requiring companies to set targets and make progress against them. So I think not only for a audience that is already engaged and committed, but for an audience potentially who are doing things that they may not have thought of or been motivated to in the past, there's a basis to say there's a shortcut here in terms of thinking about how you know, these things that you're now required to do can be done for the desired effect.
Yeah, fantastic. And Niki, it's kind of similar as well. The Commission requires organisations to do things. You're pushing people to take action.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, Sarah mentioned the idea was pitched to her in 2018 or 2019, and I think Leonora mentioned it to me in 2022, I think it was. And so a few years later, But for me, it was like a light bulb moment. I'm Gender Equality Commissioner in Victoria, but I started out in my career as a psychologist working in public health, and my job was to get change in public health organisations, and how do you do that? And at the time, this new thing called the Cochrane collaboration had just kind of, been created. What we found was that research was being done on health issues all over the world, but it was piecemeal. There was this discovery that an intervention that would save the lives of newborn, of premature babies, for example, had been around for 25 years. The evidence, the research was there, but it had never been translated into action. It was in piecemeal pieces of research, and the Cochrane collaboration's job was to bring that research, bring that evidence together in meta-studies and so forth, which is not exactly the same as what we're talking about here, but similar. Bring that evidence so that we could then translate that into guidelines in health organisations, and then I wrote a book on how to implement evidence in health organisations. So for me, this was the equivalent of what I did in health now happening in gender equality, and perfect for me in my role as Commissioner, where constantly I'm asked, well, what can we do about this? And so it's going to be brilliant for me. It's going to be brilliant for all the duty holder organisations that report under the legislation. But I also think it's great for researchers as well, and particularly if you're thinking about doing a PhD or something in that regard, to be able to go and look at what's been going on and figure out what bit you can contribute to or build on from there. So it's very exciting.
Love that. And it's really interesting because unlike health, all of the organisations, organisations, advocates, educators, they're very dispersed, so they're not in like one kind of contained organisation to then take action. So bringing us together as a community, I think is just an incredible idea. Siri, welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, especially celebrating Leonora. So it was kind of mentioned very briefly, but we met back in 2019 when Leonora joined us at the Women in Public Policy program at Harvard Kennedy School as one of our research fellows for the year. And we just hit it off instantly because I'm a huge fan of your work, but also a huge fan of you personally. So it's an amazing full circle moment for me to be on my first visit in Australia on the occasion of the celebration of the gender equality evidence hub. So congratulations, Leonora. It's really a masterpiece.
Okay, so Siri, you've written a book and we're talking about evidence here, and I'm sure there's a huge amount of evidence in the book. What do you see as the gap between, or do you want to share any thoughts about the gap between here's all of this information, how can we turn it into action, how can we make it work?
I'll offer a bit of a self-critical perspective from academia, which is that the traditional structures and the incentive structures don't typically incentivize academics to make their research accessible to the public, right? We're incentivized on the number of publications we can get in the top journals, most of which live behind the paywall, and then there's a little bit of teaching mixed in. So it's actually a relatively new development that there's this new generation of academics that care not only about generating knowledge, but also about bringing the knowledge into the hands of the people who are on the front lines of organizations, who can use the knowledge and the insights to directly impact practice. So I actually put a little bit of the, shall we say, responsibility and onus of us academics to not just write the beautiful peer-reviewed paper, but then to take the next step and challenge ourselves to distill the key insights into 3 bullet points. I always like to say that when you're speaking to an academic audience, they want to see the regression table and the modeling equation and the p-values. And if none of that makes any sense to you, this is precisely my point. Because the practitioners want the 3 bullet points of what should I do? And they're both equally valid, right? And they're both important. So I think we as academics can go a lot further in making our research actionable. And there's also a big role modeling effect, Leonora, that you're doing with the hub, which is leading the way in showing younger academics how it's done, inspiring people to perhaps pursue research and PhDs in these fields, and also inspiring practitioners to spend a little bit of time digging into the research before they decide what to do.
Yes, I'm very excited. Okay, we're going to talk to, maybe I'm going to go to Matt. So I want to talk about we've talked about evidence, we've talked about the gap between evidence and action, but I'd like to talk a little bit about navigating information, sharing knowledge. And you're at RMIT. What's your experience been in searching for evidence-based guidance on gender equality? How do you think that a university navigates it? What can we do?
Yeah, great question. Thanks very much, Stacey. And so I think maybe the microphone's not on yet. Are we going? Is the microphone on? That sounds like it's on. Excellent. Yes. So I think this question also relates to how we make impact with that information when we find it, and that was sort of part of what the enabling impact platforms that have been, this small part of helping establish the Gender Equality Evidence Hub. Really look for in that work, being able to show that we've got, we can help translate the information when you find it, and help people translate that into actual actions that lead to changes in society, lead to positive changes in society. So I think, Leonora, your work in building this sort of Gender Equality Evidence Hub is certainly, for us, the sort of poster child of the sorts of things we really want to be able to do in the enabling impact platforms, because it is all about taking the research, making that available, making it possible to find that in a form that people can then use it and apply it in their workplaces. And so, I'm very grateful that you, chose us and gave us the opportunity to kind of support this work. And if I may, I'd also call out my amazing colleague Anne-Laure Moncion, who's in the audience somewhere there, who's another of the EIP directors of Global Business Innovation, but she was also the one who had the sort of laser focus right from the start. So yes, I think kind of that presentation of evidence in a form that's actually going to be useful for creating impact out there in policy and in organisations is really key.
Leonora, let's hear from you. Let's hear from you, the creator, the founder of the hub. We're thinking about knowledge sharing infrastructure. And when you had the whole idea of the hub, what were some of the things that you factored into building the hub? What was your thought process, and what did you think really needed to be part of it?
Well, thanks, Stacey, and thanks for all the feedback, the positive endorsement and faith and positivity that all the other speakers have shared. I think building on what everyone else has said already about reiterating the need, I guess for me personally, it was also a matter of building trust within that knowledge exchange infrastructure. I think researchers can't just waltz up to an organisation and say, hey, let me evaluate your policies. So it's an organic process of building trust and realising the common values that you're motivated by, an alignment of values, an alignment that we're passionate about gender equality, and making sure that if we're putting our efforts towards policies and actions, that it will pay off and it won't be a waste of time. So I think building those connections is at one level of personal interaction where you're building trust, and that transparency of what are you doing it for is really important. Yes, the A and A star publications are probably a bonus, but that's not what this is about. It is about an alignment of core values. And Siri makes a really important point that historically and conventionally, university institutions are not set up with those types of incentives. As an economist, I look at this as an incentive misalignment, because the incentive structure is one of particular metrics, and the incentive structure is really not there to reward or to necessarily even resource that social impact and that outward orientation. It just takes out-of-the-box thinking, which is what the enabling impact platforms are about, but it also takes a bit of an out-of-the-box researcher, though I know we all have our quirks. I'm not the conventional academic as well, so I think that has enabled me to kind of step into that knowledge exchange ecosystem, and to find this as something that's really fulfilling and meaningful for me as a career, not the traditional academic metrics, and also to legitimise that amongst other researchers as well. So it could be gender equality, or it could be climate change, or it could be Indigenous disadvantage. This is the hub is showcasing how you can build that infrastructure for research, translation and transmission above and beyond the subject matter itself. The common cause or the common theme is the social problem that you care about, and you want to make sure we're embracing it and we're tackling it in the best possible way.
I love that. I think it's what you're doing, and what everyone in kind of on this panel is doing is working in the ecosystem of equality in different ways. Wooldridge, you've got the results, like here are the results of action. And then, same with you, Niki, you're requiring people to develop action plans, and Wooldridge is also requiring people to take action. And then Matt, there's the work that you do on addressing gender-based violence as well, and working internal to an organisation on that. And then Siri and Leonora on the evidence base. I was at the National Multicultural Health and Wellbeing Conference last week, and it's also really important to think about the intersections of cultural diversity, the intersections of faith, and different social inequalities with gender equality as well. So I don't know if anyone else on the panel wants to talk about intersectionality, wants to talk about how we can build evidence in this, the importance of this, what you'd like to see happen. That's a bit of an open question to the rest of us. Great. Take it away, Niki.
That was going to be on my wish list for the thing that you were going to ask me at the end.
Yeah.
So I'm going to forward now and you can let me off the hook with that.
You can think of your other 9. Yes.
Yeah. Because I do think, and I love the fact that you got that there, that there is evidence, such a poverty of data in that area. And so, yeah, I think that's what I would love to see more. And there surely is more research that we haven't got our fingers on yet that we can build on. Yeah, it's so critical. I mean, we can't design for one kind of person, one kind of woman. We've got to think always intersectionally. Otherwise, we're not fixing gender inequality. We're fixing gender inequality for one group.
Yeah, amazing. Does anyone else want to make a comment?
I think I'll build on Niki's really important point about the paucity of data, but it's also about, I think, access to capacity to be part of that data collection process as well. So if we go back to the essence of the hub is really one of democratising this knowledge building and knowledge exchange. So reaching out, and hopefully this information is going to reach some of those people in organisations who would not otherwise get access to this information, like maybe, low-skilled workers who really feel like they would need to do something about something needs to be done about the gender pay gap or sexual harassment in their organisation. How do we empower them with information so they can use that as their armour collectively, to raise awareness and be emboldened by that? And it's really important then for that intersectional lens to think about how intersectionality can compound distance from information and distance to resourcing, and having an input into how data is collected and where resources are allocated. So it would be wonderful for this sort of process of this hub to converge with community groups where that outreach is taking place and that lived experience is informing what data needs to be collected and what programs need to be evaluated and backed because that's an input into this whole knowledge sharing, and we've got these hierarchies of exclusion that are just compounded by intersectionality. So this is breaking down one of those walls in a way, but there are still many other walls, and so that exchange and trust with communities is really important for feeding into how do we improve this knowledge generation process as well.
Yeah, amazing. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because there is great distance with the university. It can often, or academia, it can often seem very, these are colonial institutions that are built on, colonisation, and science and research was used as a tool within colonisation on people of colour historically. So there is that distance and that distrust. So I think it's really wonderful that you're trying to bring us closer to community and closer to lived experience and translate a whole raft of different things into what action can we take that actually makes a difference.
Can I just say on that? I think the other part of this, though, is sometimes we get, I think we've got to get the data, but not having the data shouldn't stop us making progress. And I think there's a lot of evidence in the hub that's going to be applicable in broader context and across broader communities and identities than just on a gender basis as well. So I see that the Evidence Hub is going to help us get to solutions, as well as while we try and manage some of the data challenges that we have.
Great point.